Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me tell you about the only supplements that I use. For nearly 10 years, Bare Performance Nutrition has been on a mission to educate, inspire, and improve the performance of modern-day athletes, adventurers, and warriors through training, nutrition, and supplementation. With effective formulas that work as hard as you do and are third-party tested for prohibited substances, you can get results and reach your full potential with Bare Performance Nutrition. Head to the link in the show notes to go to the website to help me out and to help you out so that we can go one more together. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 66. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and in the great state of New Jersey, we have a very special guest, Anna Olson. Anna, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing so well. This is the second time that I get to talk with you today, so it's a great day. And even though you're in New Jersey, you're not from New Jersey. And before you tell the audience where you're from, let's just talk a little bit and we'll let them guess in their heads and then we'll come back to it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself without telling where you're from?
Okay, so I am the oldest of four. I grew up with two teachers. My mom is a music teacher and my dad is a science teacher. I grew up in the outdoors, hunting, fishing, lots of snow in the wintertime. I don't want to make it too easy. I grew up swimming, so that was my first love. My first passion was swimming. I started competitively swimming when I was about 5 years old, and then just fell in love with the sport and doing hard things, as people say. Moved to New Jersey after college, but before college, or before New Jersey, I actually lived in Costa Rica for a year and a half to teach. I taught science. And then my husband and I, at the time, were just boyfriend and girlfriend, and we're sick of doing distance. So decided to move in with him in New Jersey.
Got it. Okay. So the accent didn't come out super strong, so I'm not sure if people got it. But why don't you tell people where you're from?
I am from the great state of Minnesota, which has lots of snow.
There it is. So Anna, you and I know each other through the world of social media first and
Yes.
foremost. We really got connected though through Sam Tooley, who was episode 2 of this podcast and a really good friend of mine. And we are working together now in a coaching capacity and looking forward to the new year. We have a lot of cool stuff planned, but you are big into the world of triathlons. And so why don't you explain a little bit about how you got into that?
Triathlons. So I was actually just talking to my mom about this. She called me out of whim today, and I was like, Mom, I actually have a question for you. How did I get into triathlons? And when I was 15, there was like this email or social media really wasn't a thing super as what it is now when I was 15. 15 was 12 years ago,
Yeah,
13 years ago for me about.
you and I are the same age, and we were, I think, the last generation to really know what it's like to grow up without cell phones and social media.
Yeah, yeah, because I didn't really grow up with a cell phone, didn't really have social media until about college. Cell phone probably about like to truly actually use the cell phone like high school.
Yeah.
So I think it was like a newspaper clipping for this triathlon series called Granite Man. And my mom's like, I think you should try this. And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. And at the time, I had biked before, but just casually around my neighborhood. I live in this like development that's a circle. It's probably like a half-mile circle with 18 homes. Um, and that was where I grew up. So that's what I thought the bike would be like in the triathlon. And my mom had this little commuter bike where you're like riding like 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 upright. And I was like, I'm not going to use that bike. So I decided to use a mountain bike. And the course was so it was just a sprint try was my first one, which is like about a 400-meter swim, which is like super easy for me as a competitive swimmer. That's like not even a warm up. It was a 12-mile bike and then a 5K run, which is 3 miles. And I was like, I can do 3 mile run. That's nothing. The bike 12 miles, I can do that. I do that in my development all the time. I didn't realize that there would be hills because my development does not have hills. And I didn't realize that wind can affect you as much as wind does when you're on a bike. So my first try off the swim was the first one out of the water because I was pretty competitive at that point. I was fairly decent at swimming then. And when I got onto the bike, my mom was like asking all the volunteers to track me because they didn't have a tracking system really like they do now. Um, and because I was taking so long on my bike ride. So eventually I came in, but I was just in my face was like, I don't want to see you. Don't take pictures. Stop talking to me. And I got onto the run and it was whatever. But looking back at that experience, I can't believe that is what brought me into the love of triathlons because it really did. I did ones after with as relays with my cousins. It was a fun way for us to get together. My cousins lived in Iowa at the time, so it was fun for us to meet at a race and I would swim, they would bike, and another one would run. And then I was like, no, I want to do this on my own. And so I started doing them more and more. And then I was like, okay, I want to do an Ironman because that was the biggest thing. And that's where I'm at now. I've done 2 Ironmans and about 5 half Ironmans, I think. So that
So,
is that is the try story.
oh man. So from what sounded like a miserable first triathlon experience, you ended up, is it fair to say, falling in love with the sport?
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
And I think it was the atmosphere. When you go into it, have you done a triathlon before?
Yeah.
The atmosphere is, I think, with the music and like the blow up, like the Granite Man has this like really big guy doing like the strong arms and the just like this. I love nature, and so being out at a lake, and in the woods, it was just a growing up swimming competitively where you're in a confined space. It was such a different type of racing atmosphere. So I think that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with it. Also, growing up swimming, I went to practice as if I was racing every single day. Like I was giving it my 100% no matter how tired or no matter what type of practice it was. And so I think doing that in 3 different disciplines was something so unique and so different that I didn't get from swimming. That was another reason why I fell in love with it.
Mm. It's also interesting to me that in triathlon, in running, in endurance sport in general, it can be multiple things at once. So it can be miserable and enjoyable. It could be hard and rewarding. It can be these things that we often peg as separate and distinct at the same time. And so I want to hear your take on kind of the do hard things mindset that goes into triathlons, the discomfort, all of that stuff that most people would look at and be like, I'm never doing one of those, that makes you want to go out and do more.
I think just allowing yourself to just be uncomfortable is what I've realized allows you to enjoy doing those hard things. If you go into it and they're just like, I don't want, like the negative mindset that I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, you're not going to enjoy the process. So if you just like go into it and are okay with it being hard and being uncomfortable, you're going to have so much fun then doing those hard things and allowing your mind to go to places that your mind doesn't go to in your everyday life. That's another reason why I love these endurance sports is your mind can take you into so many directions. It's like working on 4 million different tasks all in one confined race.
Mm. Okay. So there's a lot to break down there. The idea of going into it, knowing and accepting the fact that it's going to be uncomfortable changes the experience itself. I think applies to more than just triathlon. I think it applies to life in general. In high school, I actually started a club called Life's Not Fair. And at the time, I know it's funny, at the time, I should have maybe thought of a better name, but the whole tagline was Life's Not Fair, but it could always be worse. And the idea was let's help people who have it worse. And so we would go volunteer, we would raise money for families in need, people who lost loved ones, people who needed help and support. And so that was the gist of it. I guess you could say that I always had this do hard things mindset within me. It's just changed in presentation over the years. But the point of that is like life's not fair. And I think the people who are upset at the fact that life's not fair are the ones who are never going to get past the fact that that's just how it is. And it doesn't mean that life is bad. It just means life's not fair and you have to control what you can control. So there's an element of that in racing for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. I was never the best at swimming. I was in a very competitive group of girls, D1 athletes that were a few years ahead of me. We were just a really strong team, and I had really solid coaches. And I think I was always seeking in swimming I'm like that best. I was just surrounded by all of these people that were so good that I always wanted to be so good and like looked at as one of the best swimmers. And that wasn't the case. And so I think with that hard work ethic that I developed with my coaches, it just translated into tries where I knew that I wasn't going to be the best, but I was okay with that because I was enjoying how hard I was working and how hard the process was to get from to that starting line.
Did you ever struggle with, or do you struggle with comparison when it comes to other athletes?
Yeah, I struggled with that a lot as a high schooler, and I did not enjoy swimming. I think that's why, was because I was always comparing myself and I was always thinking that I had to live up to my coach's expectations, when in reality, they set high standards and high goals because they knew that we could achieve it. And I was my only limiting factor. I was the one that was doubting. Like I always doubted myself when I was a high school swimmer. And I think if I could go back to the person I am now, then I might have been able to do crazy things. My mind was so limiting because I didn't care about getting uncomfortable physically, but it was the mental side that I did not have in high school swimming and even college swimming.
I would venture to say that most high school and college athletes don't have that. And I think back to high school football, and my dad played high school football, and he would always tell me these things, go out and give it your all and, do this, do that. And, you take it for what it is, but you don't fully understand the fact that someday you'll never get to play tackle football ever again. And it's only after the fact now, 10 years later, I look back and think, man, if I could step on the field again, I would be a totally different player. I would dominate. And maybe it's because I'm 10 years older than everybody else now that I think that, but also there's just that mindset component that gets developed through trial, through tribulation, through experience, and really age. So I think that's very valid. So
I think another thing for me was I didn't take words literally, and my track coach and my parents both always said before every race, just have fun. And I was always like, oh, yeah, whatever, whatever. But now looking at like I go into every race and I tell other people when they ask me for advice is truly just have fun and enjoy the process, because if you let your mind be in that positive mindset, you can do so many things. And the days that or the meets that I did have fun growing up were actually the ones that I did really well in. And the fact that I could not put that together in high school, and it's just a learning experience. But yeah, I definitely have to give that off to like my track coach and my parents. They always said, just have fun.
I was having this conversation with somebody else in a very different context, but it applies here. And it's just that I think if we trust other people who have been there and done that, and we take them at their word and we apply that to our own lives, we would be so much better off for trusting that there's some truth there. and you have to pick the right people. You can't just listen to anyone. But you think about reading a book from a well-written author who's well known, and you have no problem taking what they say at face value and applying that to your life. And I'm talking for anybody, but when it comes to like a parent or a loved one or sometimes even a podcast, it's hard to say, you know what, just have fun. Anna must really be onto something. Let me try that. And so I don't know what it is that's so hard about that.
Yeah. I think you have to be in the right place also in life and just like mindset in general. Um, and probably like whatever hard thing you're about to go do, being accepting that it's going to be hard and that there's going to be some type of process that you have to enjoy with this.
Yeah. So if we're going to transition here a little bit to the deep stuff, I'll
Mm.
ask you the first question, and it's a simple one. But what is the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle? So a circumstance in life that you didn't get to choose for yourself.
So earlier today, you asked me if I was in, or if we can go as talk about anything, everything's off limits. I'm like, yeah, yeah, everything's off limits.
You
And
mean you
this,
mean nothing's off limits, right?
nothing's off limits. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And this didn't even cross my mind. But my original answer to this would have been just, I've struggled with like mental health and depression and anxiety my entire life. And that definitely was handed to me, not me choosing. And it was been hard to navigate and whatnot. But I think the hardest thing that I've probably had to deal with was when I lived in Costa Rica. You said we could go deep, right?
Oh yeah.
I actually got attacked when I was in Costa Rica, and I used to be, not used to, I still feel like I am, but I felt like I was invincible. I've always been a strong female physically, but like also just didn't really care what others thought. And I kind of took that with me to Costa Rica, and um, I got attacked by a group of men. They came out of nowhere, and if it wasn't for like my family and my dad with his love of the weight room, I don't think I could have fought them off. Um, but that mentally did take a huge toll on me and my relationship with like my family and my husband because I was in a different country and I had to navigate through that on my own, but also navigate it with them being so far apart, not having service, not having a phone that worked all the time. So all those stressors, but it's something that I have not talked about a lot. I've pushed it down, and it did affect me a lot when it first happened. But I think it didn't even cross my mind until you asked me, "Are you okay? You're an open book." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm definitely an open book." And I was like, "Well, if I'm going to be an open book, I should actually be true to that then." So that
Wow.
was probably has been the hardest thing that I've had to deal with that was not my choice.
Yeah. Wow. I appreciate you sharing that. And I guess for people listening, I'm sure images pop into everybody's mind when you share that story. This is Costa Rica. You are by
Mhm.
yourself, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess I should put context into that. I was at a down at the Pacific side of Costa Rica at an open water swim event. I was training for another crazy race, and this was only a 5K swim. I was training for a half marathon swim. And I went traveled down with a family that I taught, and they stayed in a fancy hotel. Did not have money to stay in a fancy hotel, so I stayed in a hostel that was down the beach. And in Costa Rica, you have sunsets at 12:30 or 6:30 every single night. And there's no like um you know how in the evening you get that kind of like afterglow?
Mm,
It goes dark like that.
mm.
So you have sunset and then it's dark. And I was watching sunset with them, and then I was like, oh crap, I need to walk home. And they offered to drive, but I didn't want to be a burden. And I was like, no, I'll just walk. So I walked on the beach in the dark by myself because I thought I just growing up in Minnesota, you don't think of that type of stuff. So I was being naive and they came out of the back, like over by the houses. But yeah, I was screaming as loud as I could, fighting. They didn't, thank the Lord, did not do anything to me, but just the fact that there was like four of them. Um, yeah.
So sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's been a learning experience since. There's things that trigger it, there's things that I don't trigger that memory. But learning how to get through that and being willing to talk about it and get help through different type of therapy platforms have definitely helped that process.
mm. What does it look like to process that with the people that you love being so far away?
That was the hardest part, I think, for me was processing it because everyone processes traumatic events differently, and I didn't want to talk about it, but my family and my husband did because they wanted to make sure I was okay. Another thing that was hard was the service part. Down there in Costa Rica, if you're not if you don't live there, then you don't get like a Costa Rican SIM card. You have to buy minutes. So you had certain minutes, amount of minutes for your phone, and my minutes ran up all the time. I lived in Costa Rica for the experience, not to save money, and so it was a very frugal time of my life. So I did not have minutes a lot of time. So it would be between Wi-Fi's that I would get stuff, and like I would be talking to a family, and then all of a sudden my phone would cut off, and obviously instantly they are thinking the worst is happening. Um, and so I really had to learn how to vocalize how I was feeling and that I was okay and that I needed space. But to do that was hard in the beginning.
Yeah. And again, just for timeline, when was this?
This was in 2018.
18. So 4 years have passed.
Hmm.
This might be a question you don't have an answer to, but are
Hmm.
you better off in any way, shape, or form from having had that experience?
I think so. I mean, I try to look at experiences, good or bad, as a way to learn. And I think it forced me to truly talk about my feelings. And even if I think it took me a few years to actually do that and realize that I do need help in different times of the year. The
Mm.
fall is usually a time because it happened in the fall where I need that help, but that it's okay that it help can come and go when you need it. So I think if I didn't have that experience with my mental health that I've struggled my entire life, I don't know if I would have truly gone out of my way to try to get that help.
Hmm. That's a really good point. I think a lot of times when people think about getting help for something, they think it's indefinite and they just
Mhm.
something that they'll always need all the time, and that says something about them that defines them. Um,
Yes.
have you grappled with that question, that thought?
I think that's why I don't talk about it a lot as because I don't want it to define me. And I think when I first happened, I was always that's what I thought people would define me as. Like the people that I met in Costa Rica don't even know. Only a handful of people do. Because I didn't want their pity or their sympathy because I didn't feel like I deserved it because I knew what I did was stupid. Like I shouldn't have done it in the first place. And I think not telling people and not bringing it up, I could just bury it and not have to deal with it with others around.
Yeah, that makes sense. What does the help look like that you seek out? I'm assuming therapy.
Yeah, I don't like to talk unless I know the person really well face to face, like seeing them. So I use an online resource where I can just text or like Zoom chat almost, which has
Ah,
been a game changer for me.
what do you think it is about seeing someone face to face that makes it harder for you?
I thrive off of facial expressions. So like during COVID, teaching kids without their cameras on, I felt like the worst teacher ever.
Mm,
So I think being able to see someone else's facial expression sometimes can guide how I'm feeling. And I felt like I wanted to be true to myself and not get energy from someone else's emotions that they're portraying.
That's really self-aware. I know that you and I have had conversations about journaling and things like that. Do you find that exercise is a place where you can go and be with your thoughts?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 100%. It's crazy because you never know where your exercise is going to take you mentally. Um, Whether that's in the pool or on the road or in the mountains or on the bike. I think that's why I love it so much and why I love tries and just endurance in general is you don't know where your mind's going to take you. And that's the joy of it. And you feel just so fresh after because some days your mind takes you to places that you needed to. And other days it's your mind was a blank zero. There's nothing there. And that's also so refreshing to have a workout or a time period where your mind is just blank.
Mm. So we can go into the racing world. I have some specific questions for you, but why don't we transition over to what is the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose and why? And this is coming from your answer is coming from somebody who's done multiple Ironmans, full distance, multiple half Ironmans, a lot of swimming, a lot of endurance. What is the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose?
That is so tough because I've done a lot of really tough races. And I don't want to say like my first endurance races because you go into those so naive. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. So I would have to say both are my second. So my second ultra run was up Pikes Peak, and my first one was in Bryce Canyon, which is a desert
Mm.
basically. And I thought, oh, ultras were like that. I didn't think that obviously, but I didn't prepare myself. And we were at like 14,000 feet. Weather was horrible, rain the entire time. It went from 70 degrees all the way down to 40 degrees and just awful. Did not finish. I DNF'd that. It was my only race I DNF'd. And I got to 43 miles and I was supposed to do 50. Those 7 miles haunt me. Trust me. It's like 7 miles is so for me, it's so easy. But it's an easy casual run, and I could not finish those last 7 miles because I let my mind get to me. I didn't play in the rain. Whereas my second Ironman was in Wisconsin this past year, and the weather was also pretty crappy. Rained, not just like a drizzle rain, like a downpour rain, the entire 13 hours of that race. Did not let up. I have to give it props to my family, my mom and my dad and my sister and her friends, because they were out there the entire time with me, which is probably what helped. I didn't have family in the Pikes Peak one, but that race was hard. It was very hard, but at the same time was a lot of fun. So those were probably I think they go hand in hand because I don't think I would have been able to finish Wisconsin if I didn't finish Pikes Peak, if that makes sense. Like I failed Pikes Peak, but with that experience, I was able to finish Wisconsin.
I've got a big question for you that
Let's hear it.
it's all right if you don't have an answer. Do you think you'll ever not finish another race?
For sure. I hope I do. You learned so much. Um, I think that's the whole joy of endurance, not just triathlons, but just endurance races in general is how far can you push your mind? And um, it's fun to see where your mind can lead you and how far you can go and what's your breaking point, because then the next go around, you can see if you can get past that breaking point. So that was like a big thing for me with Wisconsin was I was able to get past that breaking point. The weather conditions were honestly the exact same. Um, there was no lightning in Wisconsin, which was nice. Pikes Peak had a lot of lightning. Like I saw strikes coming. That was a whole nother story. Like it's crazy. But the cold and the wetness were the same amount of time, about 13 hours. Um, but I had a different mindset going in to Wisconsin. I was like, just go in and have fun, literally. My dad was there the day before and I was kind of stressing out about the weather. I saw the weather forecast and he's like, you have no control over this. Just go out and have fun. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I'm gonna put on my 5-year-old hat. When I was a little kid, I always loved playing in the rain. Actually, I didn't matter what type of weather. I just liked being outside. So I that's what I did. And it was hard to stay in that mindset. But when people would pass me or I would pass them and the volunteers, when I would pass them and I had some type of positive remark, they would say, I love how positive you are. Thank you so much. And it lifted me up to continue to be that positive outlook for other people around me.
I don't know what it is about Minnesota, but you and Zach Donahue, episode 62, both spoke about playing in the rain. And right, there's that childish aspect of that where, as children, as Zach said, we play in the rain. And then at a certain point in life, we don't like being wet outside and it
Hmm.
changes. But to be able to channel that during a race while you're doing hard things is a whole nother level of difficulty. And I'll ask you this because my mind during the New York City Marathon went to some darker places at moments.
Yeah.
And I felt like that did propel me forward in the way that I needed it to. Do you ever go to the dark side during a race? And if so, what does that look like?
Um, I would say my dark side is really negative. And so I
Mm,
don't like to get there because that's usually almost like my capping point. So I haven't been to that dark side probably since Pikes Peak, when I quit. And it's more so just like the misery, how my body's feeling. Um, I haven't gotten to the dark side like as in a personal way while racing or even while training. Um, Sometimes I guess I'm not necessarily during races, but during really long workouts.
mm.
It's almost that like lonely factor. I do a lot of my training by myself, and so sometimes I'll get in my head and be like, especially if I'm out in the woods, out in the trails by myself, I haven't seen a soul in 3 hours. That's when I'm like, okay, this is really lonely right now. But that's about it. Not, I don't, I wish I could because I want to know how deep I can get and what I could learn from that.
Hey, if you keep going at the pace you're going, I'm sure you'll find it at some point. Now we've talked a lot about the races themselves, but to get to a race, oh man, I mean, the training that goes into that is insane. To be able to stay healthy is a whole ball game on its own. What does training look like for you? Let's say for an Ironman in terms of duration, in terms of specifics, as detailed as you want to get, and what are some of the challenges that come with that?
I think it was more challenging when I was in the classroom. Um, I, as a teacher, you don't really have a lot of say over your time. Your day is from 8 until 4, and you don't have a lunch break, you don't have a prep break. Like you're in the classroom, so your workouts are either before school or after school. I usually did them before school because I coached after school. That's one of the reasons I actually left the classroom last year was so I could focus more on my training because the really big goal of trying to qualify for Kona, which is World Championships for full Ironman distance. And it's a really, really big goal of mine. But training wise, I just depends on the time of year it is. So I'll I'll talk about like mid-year. It's usually like the heaviest part of training. I train probably around 15 to 25 hours a week, and I usually have at least two workouts a day. So, swim, bike run, bike swim, um, every day. And my weekends are my longest days. So usually on Saturdays, I'll have 4+ hour bike ride followed by a 1 to 2 hour run. So it's called a brick workout. You go to one right to the next. And then on Sundays, I'll have like my long run of the week. So 3+ hour run with an hour swim. And the swim is usually just a recovery swim. But yeah, that's that's usually the training part of it that ebbs and flows depending on the season and where I'm at.
Yeah. So just to be clear, the training is very, very challenging, time consuming. It requires a lot of sacrifice just to get to that other hard thing that is race day. What are some of the sacrifices that have to be made for you when it comes to training in season versus not being in season?
I am blessed that I have a husband that is also very hardworking and did do triathlons with me in the beginning and is now in med school. So he is very busy in med school, and we don't live in Minnesota. We live in New Jersey, so we actually don't have family out here. And we are very dedicated to, like, for me, tries, and for him, med school, where we don't have a lot of friends. So there's not a lot of sacrifice, honestly. I would say more so when I go home, but we make time. So we'll make sure if we have a long workout, we'll get up at 4 a.m. and run in -20 degrees with ski goggles on. We've done that.
That's insane. Do you
Yeah,
do you skip workouts ever?
I do. I have a few times, yes. And it was more so while I was teaching because I wanted to sleep. And usually when it got to that point, I realized, okay, I really didn't need that sleep.
Mm.
I am someone that needs at least like 10 hours of sleep a night. So
Wait, did you
if
say
I don't,
10?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, I get a lot of sleep.
That's a lot of sleep. That's hey, if you need it and you can get it, why not?
I
Uh,
know. So yeah, I mean, it's probably a blessing in a way that we don't live close to family, because we would definitely be sacrificing a lot if we did live there. Um, Not a blessing because we don't get to see our family that much now, but thankful for technology. I probably talk to my family, siblings every day.
yeah.
Same thing with my husband. So yeah, I think sacrificing, now that I've gotten a few friends, um, I don't feel like I have to sacrifice a lot though, because if you want it, you'll make it work, right?
Yeah.
You'll do it before people wake up, after people go to bed, in between your lunch breaks. Um, as Nick Bear says, if you want it, you make time for it.
Absolutely. You've got friends like Kieran over at the Garage Gym, episode 20.
Yes.
Amazing, amazing human being. And
Yes, I
Sam.
was blessed to train with him this summer. He definitely helped me.
Yeah. All right. So I got a question I've thrown out a few times to different people, but we talked about training, how challenging it is. Sometimes workouts get skipped for the sake of sleep and recovery. For you, what's the difference between an excuse and a rational, smart decision when it comes to training?
That is so hard, because I think always initially I'm like, this is an excuse.
Mm,
And I mean, I'm probably blessed to have a husband that is on my butt to always make sure I get my training in, because he knows how much I want Kona. Um, so I think it takes us a while for you to realize if it was an excuse or if it was truly what you needed. And I think sometimes it's an excuse for me where I need more sleep.
mm. She put the
Um,
word need in air quotes for everybody listening. Yeah. Yeah.
True, yeah. But that's a tough one. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have a true answer for that one.
It's a tough question. And I think for me, it comes down to feedback. So you make that decision to sleep in a little bit and get that extra rest. And later that day, you might be feeling like you got what you needed and that all is well. Or you might feel a little unsettled. You might feel off. You might feel, I really probably should have done that training session in the morning. And then next time, one way or the other, um, I felt like this last time and I made this decision and it felt like an excuse after the fact. So let me get up and do my training session today. And I think it's a give and take, and none of us are ever going to be perfect, and we don't need to be. I think that's the beautiful thing about any of our pursuits is like we have time. There's effort that compounds, and you don't need to be 100%. You just need to be consistent enough to let it compound. So, with that being said, the word endurance, it means something different to every single person. And clearly, it has meaning to you. What does the word endurance mean?
I think the word endurance and perseverance go hand in hand. I think if you want something, you're going to persevere until you get what you want, and deal with the punches that you get along the way. And I've learned throughout my training and my triathlons and my swimming and all the coaches that I've had that you got to love what you do if you want to endure those hard things. And sometimes I think you don't have a choice, but those hard things that you do have a choice on, if you don't love the process, what's the point? You're not gonna, I don't think, get your A goals if you're not loving that process. And I know sometimes that love falls off, but always being self-reflective and reminding yourself why you do love what you do. And maybe it is to get uncomfortable or to get a Boston qualifying or Kona slot or whatever it is. But if you don't enjoy the process, then enduring those hard things, it's just gonna suck.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. And I would also add in that for me, I don't think endurance is possible without something bigger than me, meaning, if I'm by myself and I'm doing something that is hard, it's a lot easier to quit if it doesn't affect anybody else for me. But if I can frame something in the light that if I quit this thing, it's going to somehow affect the people that I care about in a negative way, I'm much more likely to endure and to persist and to persevere. And we talked about this a little bit for you when you were searching for that why when it came to racing. And I'm curious if you've come to any conclusion for yourself when you're racing and things get really hard and you think about that why question. What comes to mind for you now?
I think now that I have a small platform with like social media and just having other people like reach out to me about just triathlons in general, but just being that person that can show people that it's okay to get uncomfortable and it's okay to do those hard things and be scared for the process or for the outcome, but to just go out and like just taking that leap of faith and trying it. I think if I wouldn't have done that first triathlon back when I was 15 and I didn't even know what a triathlon was, if I wouldn't have just been like, sure, let's do it, I don't think I would be here today. So I've learned over the years that being uncomfortable is great. That's where you truly learn about yourself. And then I think about just different communities and different opportunities that come your way.
Hmm. All right, I've got one more real tough question before we wrap things up with the final one. Let's say you train for the rest of your life. You train really, really hard. You make sacrifices. You want it so bad. And every year you fall just short of Kona. And you're 99 years old now. It's your last year to qualify, and you don't. And you know that it's time. You're not going to be able to get there, but you've poured every single ounce of your heart into the sport of triathlon, all of your training, the whole thing. Are you satisfied at that point?
This is like a fear of mine. I I think I would. I think part of me would not be. I think a part of me would be. I mean, I've set this goal out for myself and I've made it now very public that I want to make it to Kona. Um, that I think that part of me would be letting those people down, just like when I was in high school swimming, letting my coaches down if I didn't get certain times and whatnot. I think I've always been that way where not a people pleaser, but I just want to live up to expectations that I've set out and that others have set for me.
Yeah, makes sense. So you said part of you would not be satisfied. Would part of you be satisfied?
I think part of me would because I knew I gave it my all. That I trained the hardest, I reached out, I learned, I grew, I failed and grew, that part of me would be satisfied because I don't do anything half-ass. Can I swear?
Oh
Sorry.
yeah. Oh, please, Anna.
Oh yeah, Sam.
Sam
I
was the
forgot
first
Sam.
guest. Yeah.
Totally forgot. Pretty sure you threw like an F-bomb like first sentence, right?
Oh, like second sentence of the podcast is explicit. So there's no clean rating anymore on Apple. Let's just say that.
Your first guess.
I should have
Oh
I
my
should have
gosh.
I should have known better. And just if anybody's listening to this and you don't know what I'm talking about, you don't know who Sam Tooley is, you've never listened to episode 2, do yourself a favor and go back and listen to that. And now back to Anna.
I don't even remember what I was saying, but basically I do work. I put 100% into everything, and just knowing that, I think I would be satisfied if it's just not meant to be, and I would have to be okay with that because I did give it my all.
Yeah. That's a great answer. Tough question. Hopefully that scenario never plays out,
Yeah.
but just in case.
Yep.
All right. All right. So there are people listening to this podcast in all different places, in all different seasons of life. Some people have done a triathlon, some people will never do a triathlon, and everywhere in between. And somebody out there listening right now is going through a really hard season. Maybe they chose to be there, maybe they didn't, but they're there. And you get to speak to that person right now who's struggling. What is it that you'd like to say?
Get help in any way that is available. Whether that's starting to journal and then showing that to someone if it's hard to talk, or BetterHelp is an amazing resource. That is what I've used in the past to help, maybe reaching out to a family member, someone that maybe you think could relate to your struggles. Um, if it's with races, just know you gotta work hard to get what you want. And if you aren't working hard and going through the process and enjoying that process, then it's not going to be fun and you're probably going to fall out of it. So, taking baby steps and enjoying those baby steps is what gets you from point A to point B.
I love that. So Anna, if people want to follow along with your journey, if they want to reach out and connect with you, if they just liked what you had to say and they want to kind of peruse your social media, where should they go to do that?
Funny, I don't remember what my hash or my profile name is because I just changed it. So I just had to pull it up. But it is Anna T. Olson with O-N, not E-N, O-N underscore is my
Awesome.
Instagram. And then I'm only really basically on Instagram. I have a blog that is attached to my Instagram. Might try some other social media platforms, but for right now, it's just Instagram.
Awesome. Well, I will link that below. And Anna, I just appreciate this conversation a whole lot. I appreciate you. I'm very excited for what the new year brings for both of us. And when Kona happens, we will have you back on this podcast and we will reminisce on all this and hear all about your journey then. So thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Endure Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.